Hello everyone and welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today we're going to be doing another NFL draft grades video. This one's going to be for the NFC South this time. So we got the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the New Orleans Saints. Once again, if you've been watching my videos, I will be going through each team pick by pick, giving each pick a letter grade in A, B, C, D, or F. And then for the overall grade, there may be a plus or minus if I felt one was warranted. But without further ado, we'll get into it. We'll get to the Atlanta Falcons. So they went with the number 4 overall pick, Kyle Pitts, tight end out of Florida. Arguably one of the best players in this year's draft class. They got him the number 4 pick. Might not have been the biggest position of need since they do have Hayden Hurst, but he's just on a one-year deal as well. But, dynamic playmaker. You could argue maybe they could take a quarterback here to replace Matt Ryan in the future, but still a very good player. A grade here overall. And then in the second round, they went with Richie Grant, safety out of UCF. This is a very versatile safety. You could argue maybe they should have took Trevon Morrig. I know a lot of people were really high on him. I like Richie Grant a lot as well, so I think it's going to be a good fit for their defense. Definitely an area of need, so that was an A pick as well. So they started off very, very solid to this year's draft. And then in the third round, they had Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan, offensive tackle. Reminds me a little bit of Rick Wagner, who played for the Packers last year. Kind of probably a right tackle only, but it sounds like they're going to play him at guard. Pretty good value in the third round. At one point in time, people were talking about him being like a late first-round pick, at the very least like a second-round pick. So getting him in the third round, definitely good value there. Position of need as well, so that was an A pick as well. Then in the fourth round, they went with Darren Hall, cornerback out of San Diego State. He looked kind of interested in the Senior Bowl practices, kind of a developmental player, kind of bring in, hopefully you mold. Not the craziest about him, but it was definitely a position of need, definitely not a bad prospect overall, so that was a B pick. Then with their other fourth round pick, they went with Drew Dahlman, center out of Stanford. Center was kind of a position of need with Alex Mack leaving now. I do believe they brought in, what was his name, Matt Hennessy last year as well, or 2 years ago. I can't remember off the top of my head. So those two guys are kind of going to battle it out. Dahlman, I thought probably was going to be more like a 6th, 7th round pick, so kind of a reach here. So I'm going to give it a C grade overall. And then the 5th round, they went with Tyquan Graham out of Texas, defensive lineman. Kind of similar to Marlon Davidson in a way that they drafted last year, can kind of play on the edge, but kind of play inside, kind of a tweener in between it. So it'd be real interesting to see how they use him. Probably a rotational piece nonetheless. I thought, maybe he was like a 6th, 7th round pick. So this is a C grade for me as well. They really did need to address that defensive line though. And then the second 5th round pick that they did have was, I'm probably going to butcher his name, but it's Adekombo Ogdonaje out of Notre Dame. I thought there's better defensive ends, better edge rushers on the board still. So it was a position of need, so you can definitely give him credit for that, but it was a C grade for me overall as well. Then you move down to the pick right after that, Avery Williams, cornerback out of Boise State. Kind of a little bit of raw prospect, probably a guy that was more like a 7th round pick to me, but position of need. Can't really blame him too much there, so I'll give that one a C as well. And then last but not least, Frank Darby in the 6th round. At the time, when they drafted, this was before Julio Jones was traded last week, so wide receiver wasn't the biggest position in need. Definitely could pay off now, but with that being said, Frank Darby was still my 37th best wide receiver in this year's class, so I'm still going to give this pick a C. But overall, it was a pretty strong class for the Falcons at the top. Then kind of a lot of C's after that, just kind of a lot of depth pieces more or less. But overall, I'm going to give this draft a B+. I think it was a pretty solid draft. They addressed a lot of positions of need, and hopefully some of these young guys come in and can develop and make a big difference in the future, honestly. Then we'll get moved over to the Carolina Panthers, who had quite an interesting draft as well. So they started off their draft with J.C. Horn, cornerback out of South Carolina. Number 8 overall pick. First cornerback off the board. I really like Patrick Surtain a lot more than J.C. Horn. I have some question marks with J.C. Horn, very physical, very grabby corner. We'll see how he translates to the NFL level, but it seems like Carolina really wants that bigger press man corner, so definitely makes sense for them in that regard. I gave it a C pick. I thought it was a little bit of a reach. He's probably like a top 16 pick for me, but taking him at 8, especially over Patrick Surtain the second, I just don't see it there, but that's me. That's my opinion. If you guys don't like it, that's perfectly fine as well. And then they went with Terrace Marshall Jr. out of LSU in the second round, 27th pick overall in the second round. So pretty good value here. You could argue a wide receiver is in a big position of need with DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, David Moore in there as well already. So kind of a value pick, but Robbie Anderson's going to be gone probably after this year anyways. So I'll give this pick a B. Very good value. If Terrace Marshall can kind of figure it all out, I thought, he has a very talented prospect, but he needs to go to a situation where the wide receivers coach can really develop him. Frisman Jackson, I think it's a great fit there overall in terms of a good wide receiver coach that can get the most out of him. And then obviously you got his former offensive coordinator at LSU being the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers as well. In the third round, they went with Brady Christensen. They definitely needed offensive line help. Brady Christensen was more like a fourth-round pick for me, so a little bit of a reach here. I think he's a guy that's going to have to play guard at the NFL level, even though he graded out pretty well by PFF standards last year at offensive tackle, a little bit lower competition. Not the most athletically gifted guy in the world, so I think guard's going to be where he ends up in time. But I did give that pick a B overall just because they did need that offensive line help. Then their second, third-round pick, they went with Tommy Tremble out of Notre Dame, tight end. Very, kind of that move tight end, very athletic, very good blocker, but not a lot of production at Notre Dame. Kind of more of a guy that you're projecting to be more of something, but definitely fits a position of need on their team. So I did give that pick a B overall as well. Then Chuba Hubbard in the fourth round. Chuba Hubbard's a guy that I do like quite a bit. Getting a solid backup behind Christian McCaffrey, who was banged up last year. Obviously, we saw Mike Davis come in and fill that role. Definitely a position in need. Very talented player, and I think it's one that's maybe they can even use a little bit alongside Christian McCaffrey as well. So that pick was a B as well. Then they got Davion Nixon in the fifth round out of Iowa. He was talked about being one of the top defensive tackles in this class. And there was a little bit of character or off the field concerns. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but that knocked him down. So this is a very good value pick. Adding to their defensive line. Getting a good rotational piece there. Proven pass rusher at the college level, at least. So that was definitely an A pick. And then Keith Taylor out of Washington, cornerback. This is that other big press man corner that they got earlier with J.C. Horn. I think fifth-round pick is a very good value for him. Had a very strong Senior Bowl. I think there's a lot of talent with him, and that's going to be another A pick overall. Deontay Brown, guard out of Alabama. Very solid college career. Just not a very athletically gifted player. Weight's always going to be a concern with him. I know he did drop some before the Senior Bowl. I don't remember if he did before the medical combine as well, but at the very least, you're getting a good backup guard here. So I'm going to give this pick a B overall. Thought he could have gone a little bit higher, but I'm not surprised that he went where he went either. Then Shi Smith, wide receiver out of South Carolina, talked about Frank Darby being like my 37th ranked wide receiver. Shi Smith, probably about 10 spots higher than that. So 17 picks later, I'm going to give that pick a B grade, even though he's probably not going to see the field very much his rookie season. And then their last sixth-round pick was Thomas Fletcher, Alabama long snapper. Not going to talk too much about special teams players going before round 7, but this was essentially a round 7 pick anyway, so we're going to give it a C. And then defensive tackle, Phil Hoskins out of Kentucky. I don't have any strong feelings about him either way. You kind of already got 3 defensive tackles that are going to be ahead of him with Davion Nixon, Derek Brown, and Bravion Roy, so he's probably not going to see the field very often anyway, so this is a C pick. But overall, a pretty solid draft for the Carolina Panthers. I did give it a B grade overall. Just a lot of B's on the board. There was a couple A's. Couple C's as well. Pretty solid draft. Addressed a lot of positions in need, and I think it's probably going to be a draft that we look back in a couple years from now, and it's going to be a pretty good draft. Obviously, the biggest thing to note out of it is J.C. Horn, Terrace Marshall. How do those two players develop in their NFL careers? Then we'll get over to the New Orleans Saints, who had the most interesting draft out of the NFC South teams. So the first round pick they had was number 28 overall, Peyton Turner, defensive tackle out of Houston. So you're getting a proven guy, played at a smaller conference. He fits that mold of the defensive tackle that they do like, at 6'5", 6'6", about 270 pounds. But you're looking at a guy who was probably a late second round pick, early third round pick, and they took him in the first round. You have a guy that's similar stature in Gregory Rousseau, who went a couple picks later to the Buffalo Bills. fits that same type of profile. Might not have as much college production, just the one season, but definitely a higher upside there. So probably could have took him and been better off there. Obviously, you still have a couple different guys at that defensive end position, even if they did lose Trey Hendrickson. Peyton Turner, probably not the biggest need, probably not the best choice of defensive edge rusher. So this pick was a D overall. Not the worst pick in the world, but it was a big reach for the first round regardless. Then in the second round, they went with Pete Warner out of Ohio State. Don't think Pete Warner is a bad player by any means, but probably like a third-round pick, maybe a fourth-round pick. So a little bit of reach here. Fills kind of a position of need, looking at DeMario Davis getting a little bit older. They did draft Zach Bond last year as well, so Pete Warner, Zach Bond, hopefully they're the future at linebacker for the New Orleans Saints. It's just a C grade for me overall, though. And then in the third round, they went with Paulson Adebo out of Stanford. They actually did trade up for this pick. I thought maybe when they traded up for this pick, it was either going to be Paulson Adebo or a wide receiver. They ended up going with Paulson Adebo here. I think this is an A pick because you're talking about a guy that could have been a late first-round pick, definitely a second-round pick if he would have not opted out for this season. Very good in 2019. If you see that again, I think it's going to be a very good pick for them overall. Then in the fourth round, they went with Ian Book. I do not understand this pick at all. Ian Book, you could have gotten the sixth or seventh round, so this is a pretty big reach here. I did give this pick a D overall. I know you're looking for the cute quarterback of the future, but Ian Book is not your quarterback of the future. He is essentially Chase Daniel that can run around a little bit, so I don't think that's what you want in your future starting quarterback. Then in the sixth round, they went with Landon Young out of Kentucky, offensive tackle. A little bit of an underrated prospect. In the sixth round, this is a pretty solid pick for them. They're always trying to improve their offensive line, build up rotational pieces. I think this is definitely a guy that can do it. May end up moving to guard, but has a little bit of versatility that you can play across the line in a pinch. So I think that one's definitely a B pick for me overall. And then last but not least, they went with Kawan Baker out of South Alabama, wide receiver. Didn't watch a whole lot of tape on him myself. He was not one of the 68, 70 wide receivers that I watched. So I can't say too much about him there. His pro day numbers were off the charts, though. Kind of productive in college, but, more of a projection type of player than anything. Probably could have got him as an undrafted free agent, but, just trying to make sure that they got him. They picked him in the seventh round. So I give this pick a C grade. They definitely needed help at that wide receiver position. But, a guy that's kind of coming in as a project, I don't know if he's going to help that unit right away. But overall, I did give this draft class a C overall for the New Orleans Saints. Paulson Adebo was a good pick. I like the Landon Young pick, but just kind of a lot of reaches regardless otherwise. So they addressed some positions of need, but God, I wasn't too impressed overall by their draft. But then we're going to end it with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And obviously, since they won the Super Bowl, they had the 37th overall pick. And they went with Joe Tryon, Washington edge rusher, outside linebacker, whatever you want to call him. And he was another guy that opted out of the 2020 season for obviously the COVID reasons. So, he hasn't played in a year, a little bit raw still, but, he can sit behind Shaq Barrett, Jason Pierre-Paul, learn for a year, then kind of come in and develop. A guy that was going to be a late first-round pick, probably early second-round pick regardless. So definitely can't fault him there. That was a B pick overall. Then at the end of the second round, they went with Kyle Trask out of Florida. As you guys know, I'm not a big Kyle Trask fan. I thought, he's going to be a third-round pick, pretty much a third-round pick here regardless. If you're looking for that successor to Tom Brady, maybe that's him, but who knows? Tom Brady could play another 2 to 3 years. Then this Kyle Trask pick looks even worse because then by the time he has to step in, he could be on the last year of his contract. We'll just see. I don't see it panning out for them. I think this is a good landing spot for Kyle Trask because he learns behind Tom Brady. They keep, a good solid offensive weapon unit around him. Could be a very good situation for him, especially for fantasy football down the road. But like I said, you could be waiting for 2-3 years by the time Tom Brady retires, or he just plays till he's 50 and Kyle Trask becomes nothing too. So I did give that pick a C overall. I understand kind of the theory behind it, but like I said, Kyle Trask to me is just Nick Foles 2.0, so I'm not too excited about him. Then at the end of the third round, they got Robert Hainsey out of Notre Dame. He played right tackle at Notre Dame, very technically sound player, got better every single year. He went into the Senior Bowl. He was going to play some guard there. They asked him to play center. He played center as well. This is a guy that could play all 5 positions along the offensive line as a backup at this point in time. So that's a very valuable piece. Probably going to end up being a starter at one point, at some point down the line. So I think this is a great pick overall, especially where they got him. I thought he probably could have gone in like early to the middle of the third round. And just that flexibility overall is a great asset to have, especially in a backup offensive lineman. So that was an A pick for me. A guy that I really fell in love with in my pre-draft process. And then in the fourth round, they went with Jalen Darden, wide receiver out of North Texas. This was a darling, especially for the fantasy football community. Everybody kind of fell in love with him. I am not a big Jalen Darden fan. Just a quick slot receiver. I don't know how he translates to the NFL level. We'll just have to see how it turns out. But there's some talent there. I will give him that. Just don't think it was the best pick for them overall. They already got Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson, and then obviously the big three wide receivers ahead of them. So wide receiver was not a big need by any means. And then I believe they traded up for this pick as well, too. So that was a C pick for me. Then the fifth round, they went with KJ Britt, linebacker out of Auburn. Don't really see much out of him besides being a special teams player. So in the fifth round, I know it's the end of the fifth round. I did give that pick a C. I thought he'd probably be more like a seventh round pick. Chris Wilcox, cornerback out of BYU. Not too crazy about him. More of a developmental special team type of guy. Probably could have had a little bit better picks there. But it's a seventh round pick. I gave it a C overall. And then Mr. Irrelevant actually in this year's draft was Grant Stewart out of Houston. Had a pretty good Senior Bowl. Very productive career at the University of Houston. This is a developmental linebacker who's going to play well on special teams, if nothing else. For the last pick in the draft, I think it was a very good selection. I gave it this pick a B overall. So overall, I think the Buccaneers had a decent class. I think there's picks that were very good for them. They didn't have a lot of needs because they brought back 22 out of 22 starters. No team in modern history has done that has won the Super Bowl. So obviously that's a great thing to have. So you can take these picks where you're drafting guys to develop and come in behind some of these other guys as well. So they had a lot of flexibility there. Overall, I did give this draft class a C+. But with that being said, these are my draft grades for the NFC South. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed. If you have a favorite team in the NFC South, be sure to let me know down in the comments below. If there's any other draft pick grades that you guys do not agree with, you have different opinions on, be sure to let me know as well. Definitely look forward to hearing that down in the comments. But with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. As always, if you guys are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate it. It really helps build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports. And that's truly one for you, the viewers. Helping you guys with your DFS needs, whether it is NBA or NFL. Helping you guys with your fantasy football teams. Talking all the different football news this offseason. Like I've been saying, we're doing these NFL draft grades. I got the 3 remaining divisions in the NFC to do. And then once that's done, I'm going to be having a couple different guests come on. We're going to be talking deeper dive into Dynasty, kind of like I did last year with a couple of my friends as well. So we're going to take a look at a Dynasty draft that just finished up, kind of talk about their general strategy in this league and Dynasty in general, and kind of go from there. Hopefully you guys will enjoy that as well. But with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed, and I hope each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.